morning, everyone. It is February 9th. I'd like to call this Operations Planning Committee to order at 9:08. And the first item on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the January 12th meeting. Are there any additions, subtractions, corrections? Seeing none, can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay, Seth,
I'll second
Galen,
that.
Seth and Jim. All in favor? Unanimous, unanimous. Okay. All right. So this morning, we will have Jeremy Ginsburg joining us in about 20 minutes. So does anyone here need to leave early? No? Okay, so.
I kind of need to leave like around the 10 o'clock hour.
Okay, I need to leave before that. So, Jim, why don't you give your report first?
Okay, so from the Board of Finance perspective, the two main things on our plate right now are the budgets, and we're preparing to go to market for bonding tomorrow. I'll start off with the bonding. We're going to raise, approximately $30 million worth of bonding, the majority of which will go towards the sort of second installment of the new Oxford Elementary School. I think based on where rates are and so forth, I think we certainly expect to kind of come in with an all-in borrowing cost, inclusive of cost and so forth, below 2%, up a little bit, just given where rates are, but still I think very attractive to finance, important assets in our town. So, keep your fingers crossed. Rates will be attractive tomorrow, and we'll get it done. Again, as I talked about before, we have a AAA rating. We're one of a sort of smaller group of towns inside Connecticut that have it, so I think we're very fortunate from that perspective. We should receive a lot of demand, which allows us to continue to, kind of finance projects over time. So I'll have an update for you guys at our meeting next Tuesday with the results of the bond deal.
So Jim, do individuals buy a lot of these, or is it mostly funds?
Most of it's institutions. Most of it's institutions that'll come in and buy it, and/or banks that'll come in and sort of buy it to syndicate it down to retail buyers. So either the institutions are putting them in funds, which are then repackaged, or they'll sell it direct.
So you don't really know how much is retail?
We don't. It's kind of varied in terms of, if you look at, ultimately it's a retail product, but whether it's bought directly by retail or into sort of high-yield tax-exempt muni funds, it's kind of hard to tell.
Right. These are all 20-year no call?
Well, we expect to have a call option. It'll be 20-year debt. There'll be no principal for the first 2 years, so we can sort of structure around the town's existing debt service. So it'll be interest only for the first 2 years, and it'll be level debt service, similar to your mortgage, for the last 18 years.
And there is a call?
And there will likely be a call on it in 10 years.
10-year call? Okay.
We expect that, just given the market and investors looking for duration, you'll probably see sort of premium coupons. So the actual amount of bonds that we issue will likely be less than $30 million, but the proceeds that we raise will be targeted, just because investors pay up for sort of higher coupons in the early years.
So how much is left on Oxbridge to finance? Does this finish it?
This should finish most of it, unless there are any sort of unexpected changes and so forth. But if there is additional amounts, we can always sort of tack that on to next year's funding. But we have plenty of money in the fund balance to kind of finance it in the interim.
Okay.
And then I guess the second thing is on the budgets. The Board of Selectmen voted on their budget on Monday night, and the Board of Ed voted on their budget last night. I think if you look at the totality of those two budgets, on the operating, debt service, capital side, we're looking at approximately a 6% increase versus last year. If you take out some projects that the Board of Finance could potentially choose to fund via bonds, things like sort of fire trucks and or other sort of large projects, sidewalks, driveways, a few things on the school side, that could bring the overall increase down to around 5.3%, but it's still a very hefty number.
That's a big number.
It's a very big number, and so I think it's something that we're going to need to think about in terms of.
Man, I've never heard of a number that big. I've been doing this a while.
Yeah. Well, so the tools that we have at our disposal are taxes. Okay, we have bonding, again, which I said would bring the overall increase from 6% down to the 5.3, 5.4 context. We have the ability to use some of the excess funds in our in the unassigned fund balance, in the general fund that we talk about, that's a little bit above our stated target. However, you have to be very careful like when you use those, because one, they're not repetitive revenues. These are previously taxed dollars, and I think we never want to use those, in any one given year, use them all up. I think that's, rating agencies would frown on that. I think in addition, we're really limited in terms of using those funds. We would only ever use them, or I should say, I would only ever recommend we use them for capital. We would never sort of use funds on hand to really handle annual operating budgets. So I think our board will go through and, sort of dig deep into these.
Well, the translation into the mill rate might be less.
It could be, and so that translation, the way it goes from a 5.4% increase in expenditures to a lower mill rate is what's happening with the grand list.
Right.
We've seen some good trends in terms of the motor vehicles, right? Those values have rebounded a bit. That's a relatively small piece of our overall $12 billion grand list. There are some sort of one-time increases that we'll see, just some of the developments coming around town, but those are sort of single year increases. Those aren't going to happen year after year. And then ultimately next year, next October, we have there'll be a reassessment of all the properties in town. But again, that's just sort of reallocating taxes. It doesn't necessarily drive them up or drive them down.
Right.
So we'll look at what the real grand list growth is once the Board of Assessment Appeals sort of signs off on the final grand list. We expect that'll be up, so that'll dilute down some of the effect. But it's going to be, we have a lot of work to do. Good news, we have 2 months. We'll work with the RTM, with the Finance and Budget Committee on the overall budget, and with the Education Committee on the Board of Ed budget to kind of continue to dig through them and, come back to the Board of Selectmen and Board of Ed if we, with any changes that we think we need. But I think, I think I speak for our board where our goal is to try to continue to deliver the best services in town, whether that's on the town side, whether that's town roads, fire, police, and on the education side, our schools. But I think we want to balance that with a sort of overall tax increase that we think is palatable and, to residents, and sort of keeps what I call like the value proposition in town. I think we all want this to be a place where you can come and, have a great life, enjoy great services, but also have sort of an attractive tax value proposition.
Do we get any lift from the federal infrastructure money?
So the sort of ARPA money, if you will, the Board of Ed has, I think, $1.4 million-ish.
Total between two grants.
Yeah. Between two grants, which they can use for certain items, and I think in this year's budget, there are a couple things being funded from that.
All been allocated. It had to be allocated because we had to deliver a plan to the state as to what we were doing with it, and then we
Right.
updated it.
They're administering it, yeah.
And remind me, how much is being spent as part of
No idea.
the next calendar year? Well, there's an amount there, and I know certainly on the
There's on our side.
So
on
there's
the
some.
town side, there's like
some,
$6 million left, which could be used.
$6.4 million on our side. Some
for
of it
some
will be
projects.
used for some of these projects that are in the budget this year.
There's a spreadsheet that Dan asked for that outlines what Dr. Alley presented and updated to the board, so
Yeah.
I'll get a copy of that spreadsheet. But it's all been allocated to, a lot of it remediation and needs that came out of COVID.
Uh-huh.
So I think one thing we will be looking for in the town's ARPA grants, if there are any things in the current budget that can be funded from that, the ARPA committee is meeting, and if they have suggestions there, I think what our recommendation is that if there's anything in the current budget that we deem is appropriate to fund from those, we should sort of get that figured out and sort of voted on, so that when we present the overall budget to the RTM, we can make adjustments to what we need to tax and or bond or other things for monies that we might want to apply from the ARPA grant.
Yeah, Jim, we met yesterday, and we've gone through a list that we have so far, and a good number of things that are in the current year, with the fiscal 23 proposed capital budget are in there as proposed to be funded through the ARPA funds, as well as some that are in our 6-year capital plan for like fiscal 24 or fiscal 25. So we're meeting again next Tuesday, where we're going to try and further refine the list and prioritize. because one of our goals is to be able to get it to the Board of Finance in time to make an impact on the budget.
And so in terms of our, ultimate vote, which would be on April 8th, does that timing work?
Well, our original goal was to try and get to the RTM with the appropriation for the April meeting, so, don't know that we're gonna make that, but we're still targeting that because we, recognizing that if the committee comes up with a plan that we believe will be acceptable to the RTM, get that to the Board of Finance before you have to make a vote on the budget, that's awfully good. And so since the former chairman is on the ARP committee, and I think your current vice chairman
Yep.
is on the committee, we're in good shape.
And our former vice chairman.
And your former vice
Yes.
chairman. Actually, two former vice chairmen, because both Frank and Martha Banks.
That's right. So I think we should coordinate on that such that whether the RTM approves it ahead of the overall budget or in connection with approving the entire budget in May, because I think that's another way which we can, sort of turn, what is a 6% increase in overall expenditures into a lower tax rate for our residents.
But Jim, can you speak to how the capital budget was calculated differently last year and where that jump is coming from this year?
I think when we look at the capital budget, we look at sort of overall spending, not necessarily how we finance it. So there may be, when I talk about sort of overall year-over-year increases in capital, I'm looking at that without the effect of bonding. So without the effect of bonding, if you just look at what we approved last year, ignoring like large things like schools and multi-million-dollar sort of one-off type projects, total spending inclusive of capital is up 6%. If you take out the fact that last year we bonded a few things, and this year we have the ability, there were some things in the budget that we could bond, that's when I say like the overall spending increase, the overall sort of current spending increase would drop to around 5.3, 5.4%.
But you're combining both boards, right?
Correct. Yeah. And when we look at the budget, there's a certain way, as the RTM votes on. The RTM votes on a Board of Ed operating budget, which is pure sort of net operating revenues. The RTM votes on the Board of Selectmen operating budget, but as we know, that includes all debt service for the schools, for the town services, even for sewer services, right?
Yes.
You get to carry the whole load.
Yeah. And then, and then in terms of the capital budget, we sort of vote on that as one budget. When we look at sort of overall spending in town, what we try to do is decompose that and bring it into, what is the overall spending on the town side? So we sort of decouple the debt service and allocate it to sewer, to school, to town. And we do the same thing with capital, just to be able to track sort of how we're spending our overall resources. So we have a sheet that I've been working on with Dan and Jen and so forth, which I've shared with some of you guys, which will update for the most recent proposals on the budget and send around. Okay. But that's it from the Board of Ed side.
Duke?
That's it from the Board of Ed side.
Sorry, Board of Finance side.
If you want to take it.
No.
Thanks, Jim. We met last night and we approved, the Board of Ed adopted a budget. Just to recap, the superintendent's recommended budget was $110,832,569 for a 3.95% increase. Last night, through motions of adds and cuts, the budget decreased last night by $225,553. So the Board of Ed adopted a budget of $110,607,016 for a 3.74% increase. Keep in mind, healthcare and retirement is almost a full, it's actually 0.94 of that, and contractual is 2.15. So those are the components of it. We also approved a capital budget of $2,821,477. So that budget will now move to the Board of Finance. We did meet with RTM Education Monday night, Alan and I, to go over some questions with them, and we had previously dropped in on RTM F&B's meeting last week, and there may be more meetings with them now that the budget's been adopted. So we'll see what their needs are. And then we'll be at Jim's Jim's meeting on March 1st. COVID, it's a good story. Yesterday, 6 cases, 15 cases reported so far in February. Almost all of those are vaccinated. We're back to regular spectators at our sports and back to regular cafeteria seating in all our schools, which I think helps significantly. Just year to date, from a school standpoint, we've had 927 COVID cases reported. The good news is, looks like Monday, February 28th will be the day that we can give mask choice to our families and to our students. So the district is prepared to move forward with that. We may need a special meeting between now and then. We do not have a meeting scheduled because of February break. But the board is on notice for a potential special meeting if we have to get involved with a particular vote on that. The superintendent and the district is prepared to move forward with opening schools on February 28th with a mask choice. So more to come on that. There's some stuff that has to be done, or we need to hear from the legislator on see what decisions they make. And also we'll be looking for some type of guidelines that we can work with in conjunction with our health department, so we can monitor it and make the right decision if cases spike up or a new variant comes. The only kind of twist in all of that is the students on buses will still have to wear masks because the busing follows CDC guidelines because busing is federally regulated. So again, mixed messaging all the way around in terms of masks and no masks, but we'll continue to work through that. Yeah.
How do you communicate that to the parents, to the families?
It'll be communicated through the superintendent's regular weekly update.
Weekly update?
Yeah.
And Duke, is the legislature, they're going to work on that today, tomorrow, like this
That's my
week?
understanding,
Is that when
yeah.
they tend to pass that?
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Devil's in the details there?
Exactly. I mean, the way I read it is, that, the governor has signaled he's endorsing a plan that he's developed in consultation with the Department of Public Health and the Department of Education. He's really pushing it down to the Department of Public Health. So we'll have to see. There's various articles out there that it's a superintendent's role, that it's the Board of Ed role. We're prepared to do it anyway, or do it in a combination of, and vote to move it forward. Alan did mention last night that our letter was acknowledged. I know Alan got a call from the governor's chief of staff on the letter that we sent up about wanting more local control. So, and I think in my conversations with other Board of Ed chairs, they all kind of did the same thing in terms of sending letters up there. There is a lot of debate that I see amongst Board of Ed chairs as to where their individual schools are going with masks and no masks. Some wanting to extend it out a little longer, some waiting for breaks, and some just really waiting for specific guidelines and not necessarily wanting that local control and decision making. But I think we're prepared and we're set to do it. I think it makes sense. And it worked before when we all worked together with the health department. So. And just thank you, Monica, and all those volunteers that came together. Kip Coons and Rusty Schreiner and I and Monica touch base and working on kind of organizing stuff for the next building committee to help them hit the ground running. And I think we've got a good group of volunteers, and so it's exciting that that'll move forward. A lot of people continue to kind of bring up the portable discussion, and at the end of the day, that was decided well over a year ago that the portables will be removed, but the portables have actually saved us a ton of money and helped us from a COVID standpoint by having that extra space. But the portables, I'm sure, will be dragged out of here in some type of parade, I hope, to end the conversation around portables.
Well, speaking of the portables,
Yeah.
one of the firehouses is looking for an addition. What happens to the portables? Do you sell them?
They're
Is it
really,
using-
yeah, it's a great question. They're really at end of life. So certainly we would see if they worked for the fire department. I would think of more of them using them to burn up at the dump in terms of a training exercise.
training, yeah.
But, Mike Lynch has kept them up to date as much as possible, so that's something we could talk about, absolutely, yeah.
I do think someone from the fire commission met with Mike to look at
Okay,
them.
good.
Because what they do want, not to burn.
Yeah.
They want to put a classroom at the drill tower.
Oh, neat idea.
Yeah.
Okay, might be a great
Right,
option.
yeah.
Yeah, it might be a neat.
Not just a
neat option.
giant fire pit. no.
Yeah. Well,
Not saying that they don't want the other ones to.
I know,
Yeah.
I was just gonna say,
But-
like, they want the other ones
Yeah.
to train on, so. And just a quick update, at last week's meeting, the open choice program was voted to not move forward. And as per policy, residents and taxpayers can request that an agenda item be added to the board agenda. The agenda was warned last Friday, so it would be amendment to the agenda, which requires a 2/3 vote. So I proposed to the board, and no board member requested that we re-vote open choice, so we did not do that last night. So we'll continue to look at that program. I think there is, a lot of people want to continue to understand it better, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, there's a lot
Yeah.
of discussion on it, so
Yeah,
I'm sure.
absolutely.
I'm
So,
sure each year
look,
it's
and
worth
I
looking
said, a lot of inquiries on it, and I said it was presented, it was debated, it was discussed, we had a public hearing, and the board did its work, and the vote stands, so and we move forward. I think that's the best way to look at it.
But Duke, I think one thing that was brought up last night, I think is important for the public to know, there is sort of a DEI initiative that the board has kind of charged the administration with putting forward. It is being put together, the committee, and so there is
Yeah.
there is a big effort, and this was,
Yeah.
if you will, one piece of an implementation of a bigger plan, but there certainly is an effort at the schools to.
No, absolutely. The DEI is a big component, and it was fully funded last night. The DEI is a big component of the strategic plan moving forward. And we do have programs. We have kids going out of district to programs. We work with the ABC House, so we do a lot of good things.
So Duke, on the enrollment study, did you fund that?
Yes, we did.
You did, you fully funded it?
Yes, fully
And
funded.
so how does that roll out? You're doing it
October.
in October?
Yeah, October.
Okay.
I do have some updates that I'll share. I got updates on what our projections look like in terms of Kensett and Avalon. So I'll share that once I get it organized from Rich.
And this is going to be the same company like Maloney Broom?
Yes.
Who have
they're
done the
ones
study
that do it.
before?
Yeah, yeah.
That's great.
Duke, on kindergarten enrollment this year, kindergarten enrollment this
Yeah.
year, were you pretty spot on, or?
Yeah.
you-
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, and the challenge with that is you're going through July and August where you're still getting enrollment numbers.
Right,
so,
because I
but,
felt like that was
Yeah.
July,
Yeah.
we did have a
Yeah.
bump, right?
Yeah.
Right.
There's always a bump in July because there's a push by the district. There's a push by the brokers in town that help us get people to register for kindergarten, so.
When's the latest they can register?
I don't know if we'd like it done as soon as possible, but if you move in August or September, you register.
You
yeah.
go to school?
Yeah.
Okay,
Absolutely.
great,
Good.
okay. Jeremy?
Sitting in for Steve O'Vanny, who's stuck at work. I was a little late because I was in the process of sending Richard Rudel an email with an update on all these projects.
Great, thank you.
It's certainly, I think the last time I sent him an email was about 3 months ago, so.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, a lot changes, so we want to kind
Sure.
of pinpoint it. And I mentioned that Maloney Broom, now known as SLR, have them reach out to me when they start, because things will have changed between February and October.
Sure.
In terms of not only which projects got through the pipeline,
Right.
in what form, and when they expect to be online, which is
Good.
one of the key components for their study is,
Right.
it's not only important to know how many bedrooms in each unit, but when they're
Yeah.
coming on. The first thing we're gonna see really is Federal Realty is gonna have some units open this fall.
Okay.
We don't know how many, of course.
Sure.
Part of it, I hate to say it, is supply chain related. If you can't get a door, a window, a lamp,
Right.
but they're working, they're a big company, and
Good.
they're moving right along. So
Good.
we've been working closely with your team over there on getting
Yeah.
the data they
Yeah.
need. and we'll
Much
continue.
appreciated. Rich and Alan said it's been great to work with your team and your department and you in general, so thank you.
So the commission's still working on parklands. That decision is expected Tuesday. The Road Heights Shopping Center, as you know, the Palmers have redesigned their project. That decision's expected in March. Other than that, the commission, last night for the first time talked about their affordable housing plan. That's going to be a monthly discussion going forward. I think the next discussion will be March 1st on that.
Thanks.
Like Steve's notes from last night, nothing new. A lot of new downtown tenants will be opening soon, and that's exciting. And we did touch base with Tony O'Mickey about his
Yep.
assessment.
Yep.
He said, oh yeah, as soon as October 1st comes along, you'll be looking
Yep.
at everyone and taking notice.
And I think that brings up a good topic. I mean, when we think about these developments, which we all sort of drive by and see in town, like, these are instances where it does actually add to the grand list, add to our tax base and so forth, that we can spread our $140, $150 million budgets over top of. But I think it's important to realize, like, whether it's on the town side or the Board of Ed side, new development also requires additional services, either more students, or even on like the town side, whether it's an increase in sort of our need for building inspectors, and particularly specialized ones for these taller, some of these larger buildings, and fire inspectors, of which in the current budget there's an extra, I would say, sort of like surge.
Well, the fire marshals will be a permanent, there's a surge in the building department that should go away. But the fire marshals, because of the number of residential units in multifamily housing, they will have to, that number will be up there forever.
I think it's like, I think the latest projection that he showed us was 460 odd units that'll need to be inspected each year.
Each year.
Each year, so that is, so when we think about sort of, yes, we're building to the grand list, which is great, but with that comes additional services, and those are,
Yeah, and we'll
many
eventually
times
have-
people services, which are expensive.
We'll be having to add to the health department at some point, I believe, because some of the commercial spaces will be taken up with restaurants and such that require sanitarian inspections, so you'll be seeing that coming as well.
Jimmy, anything, and I guess didn't follow it, but I'm listening to all the stuff going on in the city. Anything around all the outdoor dining that will change or needs to change, or?
Well, that's something
Yep.
we're gonna have to talk to the commission as February rolls into March and April, nicer weather. I know the commission's been very lenient, I'll call it during COVID.
Right.
And of course, the question for the commission will be, is this a permanent thing, temporary thing? They want to give it one more year? Because it's not only restaurants, there's a number of gyms that have been operating outside,
Right.
which some people are fans of. I guess if you work out, you're a fan of it.
Sure.
If you live next door to the gym, you might not be a fan
Right,
of
right.
people working out at 7 in the morning
Right.
outside your bedroom window. So I think the commission's going to have to address that over the next 3 or 4 months.
Okay.
Do they want to continue these temporary things? Do they want to make some of them permanent? So that's one of the decisions they'll be making
Good,
soon.
thank you.
Well, I'll talk about the Rules Committee, because anything coming before the RTM comes through the Rules Committee, and we got a list. So take a deep breath. Here we go. We have to correct the minutes to the November RTM meeting, because we disclosed who voted for who on the Board of Ethics. Just an error, so we've got to change that. We're still working on degendrification of the entire Code of Ordinances and the town charter. That has gone through many iterations and continues.
So there was a charge for that, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
So are we using the same firm, or what are we doing?
yes. And I haven't heard any complaints about the amount that they would want to increase, but we are turning the screws there and trying to get them to get to, let's say, a better presentation. And I think we're there. I think there's, the Rules Committee meets on Monday night to set the agenda for the RTM, and I think the degentrification will be there.
So will this be passing an entire revised code of ordinances?
Right, no, just the adjustments.
So, but is it,
It won't
It-
impact the whole code.
Right.
so is it just one big red line of the,
Yeah. We will do an adjustment on the RTM district boundaries to conform with the state redistricting. I learned a lot about how that works. And I'll pass this on to all of you. What these folks in the House of Representatives and Senate do is they give a bipartisan committee complete power to do the redistricting. That way you see no one gets blamed. And one of the towns that got really hit by this was Darien. So we think we've worked something out here where we can do some adjustments on the voting and make it possible for us to adopt to these redistrictings. The problem is that when people go to vote, the question is, well, which senator are you voting for if you're in District 1, and which one do you vote for if you're in District 3? And then is that, and then there are boundaries that cross with the House of Representatives. Makes it very interesting. We've been working, the TGSNA committee has been working extensively with the town registrars and with the town clerk to try and get this. We've got a good start here.
Is the intention to line up the individual town districts?
It's
Within-
just to
within the new
adjust
Senate?
some streets in the very northern part of District 1. Some people on some streets will be voting for different.
They'll move to
they
District
could,
3.
yeah.
The way that the state districts ended up crossing over the town districts, District 1 was going to have 4 different ballots. So basically like 4 voting stations within the one district to accommodate town offices, state offices. So this takes 2 of them away, I think.
Yeah,
It's still not ideal, but it's progress.
it's a good start.
So will District 1 be the only split?
Well, there's
The one
an
with the split
adjustment in
Senate?
District 4 too. There's a
Yeah,
piece
some
of
part of 4 is
4
moving to 5.
that goes into 5.
They're trying to make voting easier
Right.
for the residents.
But pro
That's the
forma for
goal.
this change, will District 1 be the only split district?
I think so.
Yeah, I think so. But it might be a piece out of District 3 that goes 2 or 3 streets. I mean, it's a little section. And I think we've got it figured out. It's taken some work, but I think a great cooperation, because the RTM has to approve it. So we put TGSNA on it immediately with our registrar and with the town clerk to come up with something right off the top that we could sort of all live with.
So that'll be a short conversation to explain it all?
Mr. Kemp will be reporting on this. I'll leave it at that, whatever he decides. We are redoing the descriptions in Appendix B on what each one of the committees does. We found out when we were handing out these preference sheets after the election that the committee descriptions didn't exactly fit. They were written 25, 30 years ago. They didn't exactly fit, so we're redoing those. For serious matters, the town employees contract will go on the agenda, I believe. We've got a library truck grant that will go on for $38,000. A new backstop for Baker Field for $11,000. I thought if we worked a deal, somehow we got below 10,000, we didn't have to act on those, but I guess we. No. Well, it's just a thought. And then Gorham's Pond repair design is $160,000 for that. We have added some new members to the RTM, and we are now at 100. So that's 2 more members, which is great. We are short a member for the Blight Review Board. I see myself getting on the phone and making phone calls. We've got to get this off the dime here. Very pleased that we've seemed to be able to, we've gotten a person to do the technology committee, which is great. We may have some guest speakers in the RTM meeting. It's up to the Rules Committee whether they want to add them or not, but I put them out there anyway. We may or may not need something on COVID-19, and perhaps something from the town, from the city of Stamford. New lady there, and there's a question of whether she'll want to come on. She just started first week in February, so she may want to delay until, we'll see. I've reached out to them, I haven't heard back from them yet. So, and of course, the town employees contract. That will also get voted on, I think, in the RTM. So, busy, busy, busy.
What does the library user need a truck for?
They do their own plowing.
Yes.
They
Some-
asked, it was back in like 2013, they asked to buy a truck out of the town grant.
Oh, okay.
To eliminate the need to hire somebody to do snow plowing. The Board of Finance at the time agreed because it saved us on the operating side,
Oh, okay.
paid for itself. And so they use it for snow plowing in the winter, but they also use it for dump runs,
Okay.
for events that they have. They're not at the library where they have to bring
Stuff, okay.
stuff with them.
So why do this now is my question. Well, getting trucks is not an easy task.
It'll be a year before they get it.
Yeah, right. So if we approve it now, they can start immediately searching. So
Good.
that's why we're doing
Thanks,
it
Kate.
now.
Kate, that saves over $20,000 a year.
It saves $20,000 to $30,000 a year.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
And the last truck was, this truck is 8 years old, so the payback's been there.
Are you in the market for one?
Yeah, well, we,
We keep the Board of Ed trucks a lot longer than 8 years.
Well, you know, so there's been damage to the body. They use it to salt
Yeah.
the parking lot, and that has corroded
I'm
some
sure.
parts. There's apparently a sign, a traffic sign bolted to the undercarriage
Oh,
in
geez,
the
to the
cab,
bed, to
so
the
that
bed.
the driver's feet don't go through, so it's time.
I'll let you buy that one, Jim.
Yeah, and they move things with that
Yeah,
truck.
sure, for events and
So not
stuff.
having the employees move things in their own
Yeah,
vehicles
makes sense.
is, I think, a good idea.
Liability. Good.
Okay, thank you, Seth. So I'll give my report. A lot of things were covered. On COVID, in town right now, we have for all eligible about a 90, just 89.83% vaccination rate for those that are eligible. I would point out that, again, for some reason, the 25 to 44 is a little bit less than the average. So if you're in that age range, which we all are, make sure that you're vaccinated. We're seeing different groups in town become sources for either testing or vaccinations. So there is a pop-up that was rescheduled. It'll be at St. Luke's on the 22nd. No registration is necessary there for vaccines. There's testing being done at St. John's. This is a state-sponsored testing site, so you don't need an appointment, but it is recommended. And they will take your insurance information, but if you don't have insurance, it is at no cost. And the health department did do their last scheduled second dose vaccination for 5 to 11-year-olds on the 5th. So that pretty much covers COVID. Kate covered ARPA. We are looking for some of those projects to be used to reduce part of the Board of Selectmen budget. We have hired a media manager, Marley Hayes, who will start on Monday. So very excited about that. It was a significant development on the state side. Last Thursday, the governor announced that Fairfield and Litchfield County are now eligible for FEMA-assisted grant program. And what that means is that we, as a town, will be able to apply for federal reimbursement up to 75% of uninsured projects that where we received damage from the September storm. And I'm really looking forward to doing a little bit more work there. As you mentioned, Seth, we're funding a study for Gorham's Pond. We're doing a temporary repair there, but the full-time, or the, whatever you want to call it, repair, the long-lasting repair will be pretty expensive, and so we're looking to look for funds from that. We did appoint a harbor master this week, John Keena, and I want to thank Tom Bell. He was our harbor master for over 10 years and did a really fantastic job. As Duke mentioned, we did have 8 applicants for the 6 committee members that we were looking to seat on the building committee. So there will be a Board of Finance representative, a Board of Selectmen representative, and a Board of Ed representative on that committee. And then we seated 6 additional people, so that committee will be 9 people. We have ex officio. I'm recommending that this superintendent, the chair of Board of Ed, and a representative from each of the elementary schools, the 3 elementary schools that are the projects are impacting, a representative from the PTO be on that committee. I want to thank, a big thank you to Duke and to Kip and to Rusty, Kip Coons and Rusty Schreiner, for all of their work. They're preparing binders for the new building committee, which, they learned a lot from the Oxbridge, and they are sharing that information and giving a blueprint, and I think it'll be a tremendous help to a committee which is already being seated with some really terrific volunteers, so big thank you there.
Thank you. Good stuff.
That is all I have. I just have one last shout out on sidewalks. We do get a number of people that reach out to Town Hall because sidewalks aren't shoveled in front of their homes, but it's particularly important for sidewalks that are leading to the schools. We're getting a lot of complaints for the sidewalk over on Locust Hill that leads to the Tokenique School. So for residents that are listening, really need to remove the snow within 24 hours of the end of the storm. And that's my report.
I forgot to mention that we are petitioning the town administrator for ARPA funds, the RTM, believe it or not.
You gotta give me a number.
I will speak with the chair of the technology committee, of the rules committee of the RTM, Mrs. Schneider, to get a number together for you. But that's, when we're out seeking money, it's just a sort of rare moment. But that's one of them.
So Seth, we seated an IT committee, but I was on the RTM IT committee. Are you going to keep that committee standing?
So far, yeah.
Okay, because I
There's
know,
keeps-
okay.
They've been tremendously helpful
Yeah.
in the virtual meeting, as were you when you were part of that, to make those meetings work. That committee has been really helpful, and they're working on trying to figure out what they can do for a hybrid meeting.
Right.
If we have people who don't want to come back in person.
There's still a lot of work
Right.
to be done, so, yes.
And I
Somebody
think
said
that's-
after the first project, well, we won't need them anymore, and then we got a list of more projects to get done. This is not easy. The technology changes and the systems that are in place versus how to implement new technology it takes a lot of work and a lot of coordination to do it. And that committee they're sharp, they're very good.
Still active?
Is this all about making sure the meeting space here at Town Hall, the auditorium, works for a hybrid type meeting?
Yeah, it would be nice to be able to do that, and it's not an easy thing. Because there are there's FOIA regulations, there's state regulations from the governor, there's our own rules of procedure, and they all have to be brought together and then somehow incorporated into 2 different systems. Let's call it People Live system, they're sitting in the auditorium, and then you've got people, you've got to coordinate that with people who are sitting at home on their computer. And that's not an easy thing to do.
I think the voting is the hardest thing, to do the voting without having to do a roll call that by itself takes 10 minutes,
Well, we have a town council approved voting procedure, which we
We do.
call a roll call. We have not been no one has come to us about that yet, which is just fine.
With the expiration of the emergency orders on next week, what is the, how does that affect, is the RTM allowed to meet virtually, or is it, you know?
It will depend on, actually, it doesn't expire
So
until
it's not,
April.
that's not the part of the executive orders.
Yeah.
It was in a public act, and it doesn't, the ability to hold a completely virtual meeting doesn't end until April.
April, yeah.
But under the FOI regulations, members of a board or commission can participate in a meeting virtually if that board or commission has rules that allow it. And the big key there is, you have to have the rules that allow it, and then you have to have, that person who is remote has to be identifiable to anyone who is, any member of the public who's watching the meeting. So if you were to attend a Board of Finance meeting remotely, the people who are watching it have to be able to know when you talk that it's you. And it may be as simple as every time you open your mouth, you say, "This is Jim Palin," and, and go on. But that's the second factor.
And maybe,
And then the public has to be available in either case.
Yes.
You have to
You
provide
accommodate the
access.
public.
If you've got virtual, then the
Then they
public
have
has
to
to
have
have access to the virtual.
in terms of operating town hall, just, we have our public hearing for the both budgets coming up on March 8th. What are the rules going to be in town hall in terms of, use and capacity inside the auditorium and other rooms such as this, like after the executive orders expire on the 15th?
We're in a no mask or, optional mask situation now. If you're unvaccinated, we do ask that you wear a mask. What we've been doing for in-person meetings is ask that the audience remain socially distanced. So that impacts the capacity you could have in the auditorium. I think realistically, it's, if people want to kind of self-identify as vaccinated, or if there's a family group, there's no reason why they couldn't sit together. I don't know that you want to be the one sitting up there and being the policeman saying, "Oh no, you have to separate and go 6 feet apart." So could you get more than 30 or so in there? Yeah.
What's your usual?
Well, I think it's just trying to understand, so is it going to be that there is mandatory social distancing in every room?
We're not making it mandatory. Like if you saw this, I think the sign's still up in this room. We ask you.
Got it.
But, if two people want to sit together, who's going to, I would not advise you to say, "Oh, no, separate."
Okay.
Anything else? Then we will adjourn. Could I have a motion to adjourn? Sorry.
Second.
Motion.
Okay. Seth seconds, all in favor? Thank you.